Chapter 13. Last and final chapter in volume 1. Dang. Finally getting to the last chapter, finally. Chapter 13. Last chapter of volume 1. Let me take a look at volume 2 real quick. So this is the last chapter of volume 1, chapter 13. Volume 2, there's a little bit more of like when he catches a ride back to England. But for the most part in volume 2, okay, yeah, there's some stories in volume 2 also. It tells about Fertoa, Vava'u, and Ha'apai and everything else. So chapter 2. Oh, okay. So volume 2 is gonna finish up the story, and then it's gonna go into the rankings and the things of the culture, the Tongan culture. So, damn, finally got to chapter 13 of volume 1. Look how long it took to get this done as far as reading it through again. And I enjoy reading it and talking through it too, rather than just reading it, because that's cool too, but actually doing the research and the thinking through it is something else, boy. Okay, chapter 13 of volume 1, the final chapter in volume 1. Here we go. All the chiefs and Matapures were now assembled on the Malae at Nyafu. Among the rest was Vuna, to whom the prince went up and intimated the necessity of removing the body of his father to Fertoa. So this is Moingangongo. Vuna went up to Vuna and said, "Hey, we need to move my dad's body to Fertoa, Finau Ulukalala." It would have been thought very disrespectful if he had not mentioned this to Vuna before he issued orders respecting it, because Vuna was a very great chief and greater than Finau himself. And such a reserve on such a public occasion towards a superior would have been an act offensive to the gods. A lot of the things that they do because it's pleasing to the gods. And Moingangongo is telling Vuna, basically asking for permission, because it says here that Vuna is a higher chief in Vava'u than Finau Ulukalala is. So he's going by the order as far as what's pleasing to the gods. Let's move my dad's body over to Fertoa. It may appear strange that Vuna was a greater chief than the son of the king, yet it is a frequent occurrence. Oh, that's right. They're calling Moingangongo Finau now, because Finau Ulukalala's gone, and the higher ups they call by their name is their title. So he's calling Moingangongo Finau. He's saying that Finau, that the king is chosen from a family not of the highest rank on account of his superior wisdom or military skill, and this was the case with the present royal family. Finaus are the present royal family here in Vava'u. But that was through military force, right? Superior wisdom or military skill. But Vuna is the higher chief than Moingangongo at this point, even though he was the son of the military chief, Ulukalala. So that the king is often obliged to pay a certain ceremonious respect, hereafter to be noticed, towards many other chiefs, even little children who are greater nobles than be. Interesting. So even the kings who win through military battles still give tribute and still give honor to the blood Akis or the blood nobles, give them their due. Respect. The company were now all seated, habited in mats, waiting for the body of the deceased king to be brought forth. The mourners, who are always women, consisting of the female relations, widows, mistresses, and servants of the deceased, and such other females of some rank who choose, out of respect, to officiate on the occasion, were assembled in the house and seated round the corpse, which still lay out on the bales of ngatu. The company were all seated, so they're all dressed in basically ta'avalas or ta'avalas. And the mourning or the person in charge of this, it says it's the female relations who do the mourning, right? The people who mourn. And we talked about that in the last chapter as far as Mariner being caught going in and out of the house to mourn with the women. And Moingango told them to stop. Now get off. They were all habited in large, old, ragged mats. The more ragged, the more fit for the occasion, as being more emblematical of a spirit broken down, or as it were, torn to pieces by grief. Now, they still do that today. The ones that grieve more are the ones with the giant mats, and they're torn up. You know, they're not perfectly made mats. But it says right here, the more ragged, the more fit for the occasion, as being more emblematic of a spirit broken down, torn to pieces. So there you go. That's why it looks all torn up when they put the big old mats on the ones who are closest to the deceased these days to show their mourning or their broken spirit. Their appearance was calculated to excite pity and sorrow in the heart of anyone, whether accustomed or not to such a scene, accustomed or not to such a scene. Okay, so there's another, it excites pity. There's another reason. Their eyes were swollen with the last night's frequent flood of grief and still weeping genuine tears of regret. The upper part of their cheeks perfectly black and swollen so that they could hardly see, with the constant blows they had inflicted on themselves with their fists, and their breasts also were equally bruised with their own misplaced and untimely rage. We've had conversation before when they were in Ma'ofanga, going to go to war in Nuku'alofa, and Ulukalala went to his dad's grave in Ma'ofanga. They sat down and did Mariner described the ordinance of the tuki, where they sit down in front of the grave and they punch themselves in the face, and the women would hit themselves and mourn loudly, scream. I'm sure everybody recognizes or that sound when Tongan women mourn for their loved ones, lost loved ones. And it says right here that those with the big old freaking mats and they're tore up, it's to indicate or signify that they're the most broken, or they're the most grieving and mourning, and their eyes are swollen, red and black and so forth. So some of the description was given earlier in the earlier chapters. Among the chiefs of Matapules who were seated on the malae, all those who were particularly attached to the late king or to his cause evinced their sorrow by a conduct, usually indeed among these people, at the death of a relation or of a great chief, unless it be that of Tuitonga or any of his family, but which to us may well appear barbarous in the extreme. That is to say, the custom of cutting and wounding themselves with clubs, stones, knives, or sharp shells. So they would cry, and to give more indication of how hurt they are, they would hit themselves with either clubs, stones, knives, or sharp shells to show how hurt they are, right? That this person's gone. And I guess apparently it's seeming evident that the higher up the chief is, the more bruised or injured they're going to look, because they're hitting themselves and hurting themselves with these weapons. It says right here, all those who were particularly attached to the king. So those who were closest to him caused events, sorrow of conduct among the people, death of a relation or great chief, unless it be that of Tuitonga or any of his family. But which to us, so the Tuitongas don't do this. It says this anybody of a great chief or relation to a great chief, unless it be that of Tuitonga or any of his family. So they don't behave like this. Everybody else does, or the lower orders. Appear barbarous. Understandable. One at a time, or two or three together, would run into the middle of the circle formed by the spectators to give these proofs of their extreme sorrow for the death and great respect for the memory of their departed friend. So they're on the malae, and there's a big old circle on the malae. The body is still in the powono, right? I just found out powono just means a house with 6 poles or 6 columns, powono. But in the big old circle, to show how sorrowful they are, they would go into the middle of the circle and beat themselves, punch themselves with either their fists or a club or a stone or a knife or sharp shell, to show their allegiance, right? Their loyalty, their love for this person. And they would take turns doing it, 1 or 2 or 3 at a time. To give these proofs of their extreme sorrow for the death and great respect of the memory of their departed friend. The sentiments expressed by these victims of popular superstition were to the following purpose. Okay, so we're about to hear another reason. The sentiments expressed by these victims of popular superstition were to the following purpose. Okay, Finau, so it's an exclamation. Finau, I know well your mind. You have departed to Pulotu and left your people under suspicion that I, or some of those about you, were unfaithful. But where is the proof of infidelity? Where is a single instance of disrespect? Then inflicting violent blows and deep cuts in the heads with a club, stone, or knife would again explain at intervals. Is this not proof of my fidelity? Does this not evince loyalty and attachment to the memory of the departed warrior? The closest ones to him would go into the circle and make this exclamation. Was I not loyal to you? Was I not an allegiance, a brother to you and your cause? And then they would hurt themselves. Interesting. Then perhaps 2 or 3 would run up and endeavor to seize the same club, saying with a furious tone of voice, behold, the land is torn with strife. It is smitten to pieces. It is split by revolts. How my blood boils. Let us haste and die. I no longer wish to live. Your death, Finau, shall be mine. But why did I wish hither to live? It was for you alone. It was in your service and defense only that I wished to breathe. But now, alas, the country is ruined. There's a lot of warrior-type allegiance in this. But we also got to remember that he's in Vava'u. In the beginning of the story, at the beginning of the book, he started in Hapai, and now he's in Vava'u, and they're going to bury him in Vava'u. We also know that just recently in the last chapter, what he did to the chiefs in Vava'u. So what I'm saying is, not everybody in Vava'u feels this way. Not everybody in Vava'u is worried or is trying to, do this to themselves. I'm sure, right? A lot of them couldn't have felt the same way as everybody else, only because of what he's done to the chiefs in the last chapter, their own people. But also, you're going to give respect to the dead for him being dead. But we got to remember that they were all related somehow, some way. Finau is related to the higher ups, right? We know that all the chiefs and the Akis and the Matapures and the kings and the Tuitongas, somehow, some way, the authority government over Tonga in each area, whether it's Tongatapu or Vava'u or Hapai, were related somehow or another. So I'm sure they're giving respect for those purposes. And plus, he lived a good life. He lived a good, long military life. And for the most part, though, in the last chapter or two, we talked about Mariner saying that for the most part, they feared him. And he would rather have that than to trust that anybody was going to love and respect him in some instances for the purpose of having power. But now, alas, the country is ruined. So these are the guys that are closest to him. Peace and happiness are at an end. Your death has ensured ours. Henceforth, war and destruction alone can prosper. So these are the same guys. This is what they're talking about. These speeches were accompanied with a wild and frantic agitation of the body, while the parties cut and bruised their heads every 2 or 3 words with the knife or club they held in their hands. Bro, I can see that, you know. I've seen something similar to that as far as the cries, a person's cries or a person's anybody who's been to funerals know that a lot of the living scream out to the dead. Why did you leave? You know, I just had to go to work real quick. I just went to Hy-Vee to pick up some milk and cookies real quick, and I came back and you're gone. You know what I mean? Like I was just gonna fly to visit these people, and then I come back and you're gone. They scream that out during funerals, telling the portion of their life, the moment they heard the devastating news of somebody's passing. But at the same time, they don't truly believe in the concept of death, because they believe that once the body dies, their spirit goes on to live to become a chief or a king or a god. That's who they worship. That's the old Tongan gods. As far as what the Mariner's description of the gods from Finau's words. Finau said, once you die, the chiefs and chiefs of old, we worship them because they their bodies are buried, but they themselves, their souls or their spirits or whatever concept that they believed goes on to become a god. And then these houses that I described in the last chapter, where the priest sits in front of the house, and then they believe that the spirits of the gods, those gods or ancient ancestors, come through those houses, speak to the priests speak for them, and then they give them kava, and then everybody drinks kava because kava influences revelation or visions or stuff like that, right? So yeah, the sorrow of the physical body lost is one concept, but they also know that their true belief is that there is a house dedicated to the ones who lived a godlike life, which Finau Ulukalala would easily have gotten a house dedicated to him. He would have easily been worshipped as a god if we still believe that way. And a lot of people still believe that way. I've heard this last week of Tongan Fob saying, like that's a famous phrase that still lives on today, even though none of us worship Ulukalala, but the spirit of a guy like Ulukalala, of Finau, still lives on through the conversation of the tongue, of the native tongue today. So if it wasn't for any other religion, Finau Ulukalala would have been a god in that context, right? So somebody would still be worshiping Finau Ulukalala as a god, just like Finau Ulukalala contacted 2 kings before him. Mariner said he talked to Tuku'aho's father, and there's a lot of spirits that they talk to of old. And Christianity showing up in Tonga, basically giving us a direction as to the gods of this world. and the faith that people have in that God, in this Jesus character, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of information, a lot of things that come up and pop up as far as religion is concerned. But as far as Tonga, how they did it before, if we were still worshiping the same way, Finau Ulukalala would be worshipped as a god today. Because they speak of him still today. You know what I'm saying? So, anyways, others somewhat more calm and moderate in their grief would parade up and down with rather a wild and agitated step, spinning and whirling the club about, striking themselves with the edge of it 2 or 3 times violently upon the top or back of the head, and then suddenly stopping and looking steadfastly at the instrument splattered with blood, exclaim, "Alas, my club, who could have said that you would have done this kind office for me, and have enabled me thus to evince a testimony of my respect for Finau." You can hear that in Tongan. Eh? Somebody yelling at his club. Shit. Now they call it Paul Vai, as far as a club. And they may have called it that back then as well. But they're speaking to their club. I appreciate the ordinance that you are fulfilling by cutting my head or whatever it is, speaking to their club to show my love and my appreciation for Finau Ulukalala. They're speaking to the weapons as they do so. In gratitude, no less. Alas, my club, who could have said that you would have done this kind office for me and have enabled me thus to evince a testimony of my respect for Finau. Never, no, never can you again tear open the brains of his enemies. Alas, what a great and mighty warrior has fallen. Oh, Finau, cease to suspect my loyalty. Be convinced of my fidelity. But what absurdity am I talking? If I had appeared treacherous in your sight, I should have met the fate of those numerous warriors who have fallen victims to your just revenge. But do not think, Finau, that I reproach you. No, I wish only to convince you of my innocence. For who that has thoughts of harming his chief shall grow white-headed like me. An expression made use of by some of the old men. O cruel gods, to deprive us of our father, of our only hope, for whom alone we wish to live. We have indeed other chiefs, but they are only chiefs in rank, and not like you, alas, great and mighty in war. Golly, now they're clowning on the other chiefs. Which, I mean, they're not lying, you know what I mean? They're proclaiming in Tongan. Finau, si, ke alu koe, you know, otua koe, or whatever it is that they're yelling. Mighty and great. These chiefs are cool and everything. They're all, you know, they're tough, but they ain't you. Such were the sentiments and conduct on this mournful occasion. Some, more violent than others, cut their heads to the skull with such strong and frequent blows that they caused themselves to reel, producing afterwards a temporary loss of reason. So they're knocking themselves silly over here. Whether it's loss of blood or just hitting themselves in the head enough times to make them wow out, wibble wobble. It is difficult to say to what length this extravagance would have been carried, particularly by one old man, if the prince had not ordered Mr. Mariner to go up and take away the club from him, as well as 2 others that were engaged at the same time. So, Moingangongo, or Finau Moingangongo at this point in time now, because he's a Finau, he's who they're calling Finau. There's some old guys. There's some guys that, if you would look up with the sense, and feel sorry for him and feel like, you know what, tell them not to do that. Go take the club away from him. And Moyangongo tells Toki, Ukamea, Mariner, go and take the club away from him and tell him not to do that. It's okay. All right? Moyangongo seems like a more reasonable guy. Like he's feeling the right way and he's acting upon it. Where I feel like there's a lot of these kings would have just let whoever it is come show, which is what it is. It is what it is. Let him show his grief, let him show his loyalty and allegiance, let him beat himself in the head until he knocks himself out. But it says right here that the prince ordered Mariner to stop a few of them. It is customary on such occasion when a man takes a club from another to use it himself in the same way about his head. But Mr. Mariner, being a foreigner, was not expected to do this. He therefore went up and after some hesitation and struggle, secured the clubs and one after another and returned with them to his seat, when after a while they were taken by others who used them in like manner. So these 2 or 3 guys, probably old guys, probably, just guys who Moyangongo thought they shouldn't be doing it. Mariner, go, Toki, go tell those guys, bring their clubs. Collects them, brings them back, sits down with them, and then another group would come up and grab the clubs and continue. After these savage expressions of sorrow and had been continued for nearly 3 hours, the prince, having first signified his intentions to Vuna, for reasons before stated, gave orders that the body of his father should be taken to Fertoa to be buried. In the first place, a bale of ngatu was put on a kind of hurdle, and the body laid on the bale. The prince then ordered that, as his father was the first who introduced guns in the wars of Tonga, the prince then ordered that, as his father was the first who introduced guns in the wars of Tonga, the 2 carronades should be loaded and fired twice, bro, before the procession set out, and twice after it had passed out of the Malae. He gave directions also that the body of Finau's daughter, lately deceased, should be taken out of the faitoka, or the cemetery, the grave, in the model of a canoe, and carried after the corpse of her father, that during his life, as he wished always to have her body in his neighborhood, she might now at length be buried with him. So Taria Ilangi was the daughter that we read about last chapter, or the chapter before. Taria Ulangi or Taria Wailangi or something like that. And we assumed that it was from a Samoan wife, because Moyangongo brought 2 Ha'amoa girls from Ha'amoa. He already had 2 Tonga girls, wives, and brought the 2 Ha'amoa girls and married them. So they're intermarrying. We know that there's still everybody else still there. The Palangis, the Hawaiians, the Fijians, everybody else is just still there. They're living the natural order of the culture inside of Tonga, in Hawaii, and now in Vava'u. But he's told Vuna, let's take basically his sister, which is a younger girl, Moyangongo. Let's take my sister over there to Fertoa and bury him over there with my dad. What was I going to say about that? Oh, the carronades. He's saying right here, Moyangongo is saying, and Mariner is recording it, that this is the first time Tongans have fought with guns. Now, if we look at Nuku'alofa and look at the Vava'u war, they had both the muskets and the cannons over there. Well, they're carronades, which are smaller versions of cannons, but they still had to mount them on wheels, right? and to fire off 2 rounds before they left the Mala'e to go to the Faitoka, and after they passed and everybody passed the Mala'e, they fired 2 more, like the 21 gun salute. That's crazy. And I don't know if Boinga Ngongo, I mean, he may have heard from Mariner if that still existed back then, right? 21 gun salutes or cannons firing off. But just from the surface reading it, it seems like Boinga Ngongo just requested it. Fire off 2 rounds, and then we'll leave the Mala and go to the fight Toka. And then once we leave and everybody's out, fire off 2 more rounds. Like a 21 gun salute from my father, Finau Ulukalala, which, yes, he deserved a 21 gun salute, regardless of what we think of him from what we've learned reading about him. Matters being thus arranged, Mr. Mariner loaded the guns and fired 4 times with blank cartridges. The procession then moved forward. The wives of the deceased and women attendants proceeded in silent sorrow. Next followed the body of Finau, the body of his daughter, the Matapures, and lastly, the young prince and his retinue. I remember looking up what retinue means, but I hate that I keep on forgetting the definitions. Retinue definition. A group of advisors, assistants, and other accompanying an important person. Okay. So they fired off a couple of shots. Let's see. The procession moved. It was the wives of the deceased. So the body went forward. The wives of the deceased and women attendants. Next followed the body of Finau. So the wives went up front. And all his wives went up front. And then Finau's body. Then the body of the daughter. And then the Matapures. And then the prince behind everybody else. The prince and his retinue. Group of advisors, assistants, and other company. Important person. When the procession had got out of the fortress, the Mala'e of which we are speaking, being in the middle of the fortress of Nyafu, and had passed the place where the guns were drawn up, Mr. Mariner fired 2 more rounds, then loaded them with canister shots, lighted a match to be in readiness in case of need, and ordered the guns to follow the procession while he went last to see that they were properly drawn. So the guns followed. It was not the prince's intention to order another salute, but he had previously told Mr. Mariner to load them again, not with blank cartridges, but with shot, and to carry a lighted match in his hand, for perhaps, said he, we may have need of it. Moingango was another guy head on a swivel, because he said fire 2 before we leave the Mala'e, fire 2 after, and then after that load 2 rounds, live rounds into the cannons. Make sure the rest of the guns probably are all loaded with live rounds now, just in case, because he's saying right here, for perhaps, he said, we may have need of it. This, it may be easily seen, was a measure of policy. He ordered them to be fired, that he might have a plea for carrying them in the procession along with him, and he ordered them to be loaded a 3rd time, as if they were to be in readiness for another salute at the grave, but in fact for his own safeguard, lest the certain chiefs should take advantage of the opportunity. Yeah, head on a swivel. Even at his death, at his procession, at his funeral, Finau, even at death, had to have his head on a swivel. We don't nobody know these Tongans, bro. Everybody's got to stay head on swivel. Don't nobody know these Tongans, bro. Let's just stay ready, right? Now, because they're hot by guys in Vava'u, right? Now, they all took the Port-au-Prince together, right? They share memories. Vava'u and Hot Pai took the Port-au-Prince together. Those guys were there. Nuku'alofa, Vava'u and Hot Pai together. But now, the Hot Pai guys are in Vava'u, and they went to war with them, and we got to be ready. We got to be ready. These Hapai guys are something else, boy. All right. In the course of 2 hours, they arrived at Fertoa. So the walk from Nyafu to Fertoa was 2 hours. Now, I don't know how the literal walk is. There's a guy going to Tonga, an older gentleman. He's gonna go run for the I guess the noble or whatever, right? The seats in parliament in Tonga. He's supposed to be over there already, but he's on his way over there. And all I asked him, if he wins, I asked him, hey, if you win or if anything happens and you win, all I asked is like free travel. So I go see all these places and record it, and see where all the monuments, the caves, the place where the Port-au-Prince went down. Like, I would love to go see all of this, because this cemetery in Fertoa, I've asked a lot of people where the cemetery is, and none of them can tell me where it is. Because in Fertoa now, today, it's a different cemetery. What I'm looking for is what we're about to describe here, as far as when they bury him here. Check it out. In the course of 2 hours, they arrived at Fertoa. Anybody who knows how far that is from Fertoa to Nyafu Fertoa, where the body was laid in a house on the Malaya at some distance from the grave, till a smaller house could be brought close to it. And this was done in the course of an hour, the corner post being taken up, the four pieces which compose the building, a kind of shed in a pyramidal form, the eaves reaching within 4 feet of the ground, were brought by a sufficient number of men and put together at the place where it was wanted. So this is no different from today too. Carrying houses, carrying buildings, and moving it for the purposes of a king. And you can go online and find there's all kinds of different videos and pictures of guys carrying giant buildings, made out of the stuff they're describing here. So it's nothing new. Sorry, guys. Yep. Where are you from? I'm in Missouri. Yep, I'm Tongan. Yep, Samoan ties, Fijian ties. All that semantics, right? Yeah, our answer is worse than said it. They got flies in here fighting, bro. What do you look for in a man? What the heck? What's going on there? Russia with love. Здравствуйте. Toko. Tope. Anyways, I had a call. I had to friggin' how? Yeah. Lion at kava, guys who drink a lot. How? Yep. And Siko that houses is. Tokyo Kamea. Yep. Steel axe. Iron axe. Iron axe. Okay. Sorry about the delay there. Let's go. There's a footnote. It should be mentioned that the young prince. Let's see. Can you get this camera straight? It should be mentioned that the young prince had now in his possession only 2 carronades, the other 2 being at the Ha'apai Islands with Tupoto'a. But then Tupoto'a had only half a barrel of gunpowder and no iron shot, whereas the prince had 7 or 8 barrels and a considerable number of balls. Oh. So all the shots went with Finau Ulukalala, obviously. Just in case, probably, just in case the Potoa had something to say. It says right here, the other carronades were in Hapai with the Potoa with a half a barrel and no shots. These guys had 8 barrels and a lot of shots. All right. Finau, just staying on top of things. Okay. Where the hell are we? Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Here we go. 2 hours from Nyafu to get to Fertoa. They carried the house, that's right. In the course of 2 hours, they arrived at Fertoa, where the body was laid in a house in the Malaya at some distance from the grave, till a smaller house could be brought close to it. And this was done in the course of an hour. So they brought that house over in an hour. The corner post being taken up 4 pieces, which compose the building, a kind of shed. The body is always placed in a house in front of the faitoka during the time the grave is digging. If there be no house near, a small one is immediately brought for the purpose, which, from the construction of their houses, is readily done by the aid of 50 or 60 men. In pyramidal form, the eaves reaching within 4 feet of the ground. So it's a short house because the eaves are 4 feet high. Were brought to a sufficient number of men and put together at the place where it was wanted. This being done, the body was brought on the same hurdle or hand barrow to the newly erected building, if it may be so termed. And then being taken off the hurdle, it was laid within on the bale of ngatu, and the house was hung round with black ngatu reaching from the eaves to the ground. You see what I mean by how the words are put? They're very descriptive, but they're very old school, old Englishy, to the point where you kind of have to sit and put it together. I love the description, though. They're saying that they got to the cemetery where the grave is. The body is set on top of ngatu, and a house is built around the body with a little hut. And then on the eaves are hung down black drapes all the way around while they dig the hole. And typically they're moving dirt. And then, because in Tonga, a lot of it is tomb. I was a kid when my youngest sister passed away in Tonga, but a lot of it, the mounds of the cemetery, of the graves, they're just mounds of dirt. But when you remove the dirt, it's a tomb built, concreted, either block walled or whatever, but it was a tomb. And my uncles stood around the grave when they took my sister's body into the grave, and they had to hold up the ngatu up so that nobody looks down into it. It was only my dad. So once they removed the dirt, and my dad went in, removed the cover of the tomb, and then came back out and grabbed the small box that my little sister was in and took her down into the tomb. That's how it's always been, as far as I can remember, or as far as me remembering burials in Tonga. A lot of them are like that. A lot of them are buried like that, and nobody. It's taboo to look inside of there to see the remains of other people, because my dad said he went down in there into the room, the tomb, and he saw his mom, his grandfather, his grandmother in the same tomb, but the boxes were rotted out and a couple of the bodies had fallen out of the boxes. And he said it scared him, which understandably so. Anybody who's been to Tonga know that those things are, they're very taboo, superstitious belief type thing, You can't desecrate something like that or it's going to come and haunt you. So he said he put the box down and then pushed it towards the thing almost in a hurry, pushed it and kicked it further towards where his ancestors were, and then climbed back out as fast as he could because he was freaking scared. Probably dropped his balls in there too. And then, he moved the tomb cover back over, and then told, because everybody else was standing on the outside of the ngatu, nobody could see what was going on in there. But the description of it was funny when he was describing how scared he was, which understandably so. Anyway, all that just was brought to my memory thinking about the ngatu, the fare, the everything else. Funeral of Ulukalala. The women, who were now all assembled and seated round the body, began a most dismal lamentation similar to that at Nyafu. So there they go. They're going to lament again. They're going to cry like that again. They cry like that in Nyafu. That description, that sound, right? Everybody knows and understands that sound of mourning and lamentation is about to happen again here in Fertoa. In the meantime, a number of people whose business it was to prepare graves were digging the place of interment with the Faitoka under the direction of Lanaki, a matapure whose office was to superintend such affairs. Lanaki. He spelled it L-A-N-A-G-I. Lanaki. Lanaki. The thing with the Tongan language also is how they abbreviated a lot of stuff. Just like in the dictionary here, how he says fuakava. Now, fuakava to us means covenant, right? A covenant. But Mariner says fuakava comes from the phrase fu hekava because of the fooing sound that you make in kava and the oath you make when you partake. Make the fooing sound and partake of kava in the sanctity of ceremonious kava drinking. So I'm not sure what lanaki means, but the side note that my dad put in here was it could be langi. Lanaki. Okay. When the Faitoka, under the direction of Lanaki, a matapure whose office was to superintend such affairs. Having dug about 10 feet, they come to the large stone vault, which was described in the note, page 135. A rope being then fastened double round one end of the stone, which always remains a little raised from for this purpose by means of certain bodies placed underneath. So this is what I mean. This is what I mean. Fertoa people, Vava'u people, this is what I'm talking about. Has anybody or does anybody know where this is? Okay? Having dug, so it seems like you gotta dig 10 feet. Having dug about 10 feet, they came to the large stone vault. I was talking about the vault that my sister is buried in, that my great-grandparents were buried in, that my dad saw, and only my dad saw. It says right here that there's a vault in Fertoa 10 feet below the surface. They came to a large stone vault, such as was described in page 135. Let me see what's on 135 real quick. What the hell is on 135? Judgment during the sacrifice time came expecting to bow Niwa. Burying place included grave, mount which sunk. Oh, okay. So he's just talking about how sort of shed over it. The grave of a chief's family is a vault lined at the bottom of a large stone. So they're talking about vaults, graves. No different from what I just described about my sister's grave. It's a vault. 10 feet below the surface. And this is what nobody can tell me where this is. Vava'u people, Fertoa people, right? A rope being then fastened double round one end of the stone, which always remains a little raised for the purpose by means of which bodies placed underneath. It was elevated by the main strength of 150 or 200 men pulling at the two ends of the rope towards the opposite edge of the grave until it was brought up on end. So they dug 10 feet in Fertoa, where the kings and the warriors and everybody was buried. And once they got down 10 feet, there is a big giant slab stone that sat almost at an angle, and they tied a rope to it. And he said 150 or 200 men were standing up above out of the hole, and they had to pull that vault ceiling up until it was open. That's how they opened it. 150 or 200 men had to pull the top of it till it was brought up on end. The body being oiled with sandalwood oil and then wrapped in hamoa mats, was handed down on a large bale of ngatu into the grave. The bale of ngatu was then, okay, so let's look at that real quick. The body was oiled with sandalwood oil, wrapped in hamoa mats, hauled down in a large bale of ngatu into the grave. Okay, interesting. The bale of ngatu, once something is a story is told, and then it goes through the generations, it can be blown out of proportion to make it look like this is what always happened. But specifically, this is what happened at Finau Ulukalala's funeral. His body was oiled with sandalwood and then wrapped in hamoa mats and then handed down on a large bale of ngatu. Nowadays, the whole entire box, right? The concrete box that the casket is put in, is wrapped with a fala, right? Which is interesting because the bodies back then were wrapped in falas. The mourners who were mourning the most were wrapped in falas, as if they were all facing the same fate, because their exclamations was, "You die, we might as well all be dead." Or that's how it feels, right? That's how the pain of losing feels. The bale of ngatu was then, as is customary, taken by the before mentioned matapudes at his prerequisite. Next, the body of his daughter, in the model of a canoe, was let down to, yeah, that's right, because she was in a coffin that was shaped like a little canoe. Let down in like manner and placed by his side. The footnote says, the grave, which was considered a large one, is capacious enough to hold 30 bodies. I feel like that should say spacious. It says capacious, bro. Let me get the, comes from the word capacity. Capacious. Gotta do me like that, bro. Hey, this grave, which is considered a large one, is capacious enough to hold 30 bodies. So it's spacious or capacitated for 30 bodies. 2 bodies, which Mr. Mariner saw there, and which were in a very dry but perfect state, had been buried, as he was told by old men when they were boys, and consequently must have been there upwards of 40 years, while several others, which were nothing remained but the bones, had not been buried so long. This circumstance the natives supposed to be owing to different kinds of constitution, though in all probability to the kind of duration of disease of which they died. So Mariner's saying he's looking in there, and there's 2 bodies that were perfectly wrapped. They were dried, but they weren't decomposed. And the rest of the bodies, you can still tell that they're bones there. But they're all wrapped. So he's thinking there's bodies there that's been here for a long time because there's bones. But I also see a couple bodies there that are dry, but they're not fully bones. So they were still burying them probably during the time where Mariner was over there, right? Because if this is the cemetery or the grave of a king or the grave of the chiefs of the warriors and the chiefs, then they're burying people here often. I don't expect anybody to find it because I don't even know where they would look in Fertoa because the walls no longer exist or anything like that. But there is a tomb. If you are in Vava'u, in Fertoa, there is a tomb down there where Finau Ulukalala's body is buried. Oh, Yahweh. That is crazy. That is crazy. And I'm sure a lot of bodies, and I don't know how you would determine whose body is what and where, because we're freaking talking about what, 200 years ago, 220 years ago. But yeah, Fertoa people, he's buried in Fertoa. Let's see. Where are we? Oh, Nanaki Matapule. Oh, okay, we passed that. Okay. Next, the body of his daughter in the model of a canoe was let down in like manner and placed by his side. The great stone was then lowered down with a loud shout. Immediately, certain Matapules and warriors ran like men, frantic round about the Faitoka, exclaiming, "Alas, how great is our loss! Finau, you are departed. Witness this proof of our love and loyalty." At this time, they cut and buried their own heads with clubs, knives, and axes. I said buried. It says bruised. Sorry. Golly. I don't know if I'm too excited or I'm just dumb. At the time, they cut and bruised their own heads with clubs, knives, and axes, etc. So once the big old freaking stone was put down by the 150 or 200 men, then everybody ran and went round shouting. Immediately, certain Matapules, so not everybody, but certain Matapules and warriors ran like men frantic round about to fight Toka, explaining, "Alas." What would alas be? Oh, Yahweh, Yahweh, Tahamanie. How great is our loss, Finau. You are departed. Witness this proof of our love and loyalty. At the same time, they cut and bruised their own heads with clubs, knives, and axes. Excuse me. Excuse me. The whole company now formed themselves into a single line, the women first and afterwards the men, but without any particular order as to rank, and proceeded towards Liku, or the back of the island, as they term it, because there is no opening for large canoes, for the purpose, as customary, of getting a quantity of sand in small baskets for the use directly to be described. The guns were not, however, taken in the procession, as the young prince considered the measure now unnecessary, everything appearing perfectly quiet, for if any party had intended to revolt, they would have done it on their way from Nyafu to the grave, while they had clubs and spears in their possession, and not during the ceremony of burial. Before which every man, according to custom, deposits his arms in the neighboring houses. So Moingangon was content. Moingangon was cool. Everybody in Vava'u loved Moingangon just because Moingangon was a good kid. Finau Ulukalala was who they worried about. But Moingangongo's good friend was not only Vuna, Vuni, and Vuki. Like, Moingangongo was a younger guy, so he was friends with most of the chiefs in Vava'u. He was raised there. He grew up there. So Vava'u wouldn't do anything treacherous to Moingangongo. They loved him. They raised him. Okay, anyways. It is true they might afterwards have taken up, and so basically Moingangongo was saying, all right, we're going to go to Liku to get sand, leave the cannons, Because if they were going to attack us, they would have done it on our way from Nyafu to Fertoa. But now that the body's buried, there is no purpose for them to attack us now. Because we were vulnerable at that point in time. Now it's unnecessary. So it's looking like the Vava'u people are cool. Like, let him bury his dad. So now they're going to the beach. It is true they might afterwards have taken up arms again and planned mischief, but the prince, who had always his spies about, neither perceiving nor hearing of any symptoms of disturbance, did not wish to seem fearful of revolt, which would have been the case had he taken the guns with him to the back of the island, and which he could not have done with any plausible pretense, such as he had for bringing them to Fertoa. So you can't just carry a bunch of freaking guns and cannons with you and then pretend to be friendly or friends with everybody. Everybody understood when you were going from Nyafu to Fertoa. That's cool. Everybody understood. But now that the body's buried, the ordinances are done. We're going to go finish this off by getting sand from the beach. It's not necessary. Vava'u basically showed their loyalty to Moengangongo. In their road to the back of the island, they sang loudly the whole way as a signal to all who might be in the road or adjacent fields to hide themselves as quickly as possible from the procession. During this part of the ceremony, if any man had unfortunately made his appearance, he would undoubtedly have been pursued by one of the party soon dispatched with the club. So strictly is this attended to that nobody in Mariner's time recollected a branch of a law so well known. If I were to interpret this, this is what it seems like. Because it's saying, when they walk from Nyafu to Liku to get sand in baskets, they're singing loud to let everybody know who wasn't present at the funeral, to let them all know to hide themselves because of the dishonor or disrespect of not showing up to the funeral, not showing face. That's what it sounds like. Because it says that loudly they sang loudly the whole way as a signal to all who might be in the road or adjacent fields, hide themselves as quickly as possible from the procession. During this part of the ceremony, if any man had unfortunately made his appearance, he would undoubtedly have been pursued by one of the party and soon dispatched with the club. So strictly is this attended to that nobody in Mr. Mariner's time recollected a breach of a law so well known. In other words, everybody knew this law so well that nobody messed with it. And it's almost like a thing where we're on our way to Liku, and if we see you on the road or in the plantations working or anything like that, we know how you disrespected us, especially if it's Finau Ulukalala. Hide yourselves for not showing face to this funeral. That's what it sounds like. Hide yourselves. You didn't come to honor the great king or the great chief. Hide yourself. Because if not, we're going to come and we're going to dispatch you with a club. Even if a common man were to be buried and Finau himself were to be upon the road or in the neighborhood of the procession while going to get sand at the back of the island, he would immediately hide himself. Not that they would knock out the king's brains on such an occasion, but it would be thought sacrilegious and unlucky, the gods of Pulotu being supposed to be present at the time, and the chiefs are particularly careful not to infringe upon the sacred laws, lest they should be set an example of disobedience to the people. So it's a God thing. It's a superstitious thing. It's a sacrilegious faith-believing thing, right? And it could be both, because they're saying the Otuas are here with us. We're walking with the Otuas to Liku. So hide yourselves for not attending. It still comes down to that. Because you didn't attend, because you're not one of these people in the procession. you are somebody who didn't pay attention to the ceremony, the funeral, which means you guys are showing something of sacrilegious by not attending the funeral, especially one of a future god. And I don't think he's going to like that. So it's up to your discretion as far as what they were thinking, as far as that's concerned. The song on this occasion, which is very short, is sung first by the men and then by the women, and so on alternately, and intimates, though Mr. Mariner has forgotten the exact words, that the fala, which is the name of their part of the ceremony, is coming, and that everybody must get out of the way. Fala. It's called a fala. That's what they're doing. The procession is going to Liku to collect sand, and that's called the fala. But it's a song. So the men will sing it, and the women will sing it. And the men will sing it, and the women will sing it all the way to Liku, to let everybody know in the plantations on the road to hide themselves. The gods are on their way. Okay. When they arrived at the back of the island, where any body may now be present, everyone proceeded to make a small basket of leaves of the coconut tree, holding about 2 quarts, and to fill it with sand, which done, they then proceeded with the same ceremony to the grave. By this time, the grave above the vault was nearly filled with the earth lately dug out, the remaining small space being left to be filled up by the sand, which is always more than enough for this purpose, that the mount of which the faitoka consists may be strewed in like manner, it being considered a great embellishment to a grave to have it this covered. So basically, so they're saying each grave is poured on or marked with sand. Yeah, I did notice that. It's sand that covers it. Now it's rock sometimes, I think. And now sometimes the cemeteries just have just the tomb, if I'm not mistaken. But it's saying here that the tomb is buried underground and then dirt and then a big pile of sand. The temporary house is then taken to pieces and thrown behind the faitoka in the hole out of which the earth was originally dug to raise the mount on which the faitoka stands, in which are thrown all the baskets as well as the remaining quantity of earth not used in filling up the grave. So, scene. 10 feet below the earth, tomb, stone, lift up. Finau's body and Tariailangi's body put in. The 200 men put the stone back. They bury it. While they're burying it, the fala is going on. The fala is the men and women who go to the beach to get sand. While they're doing that, they're filling in this tomb. Damn, they got some crazy flies up out here. And then by the time the people get back from the beach doing the fala, everybody hiding on the way or whatever, on the plantation or in the road, and they put a big old mound right on top of it. I wonder if it's to mark it or what. Anyway, then the baskets are thrown to the side in the hole where they got the dirt out of and everything else. The little house on the prairie was broken down and thrown in there. The ground within the faitoka is now covered with mats made of leaves of the coconut tree. During this time, the company remained seated on the green before the faitoka, clothed in mats, and their necks strung with the leaves of the ifi tree. There you go, ifi tree. After which, they arose and went to their respective habitations, where they shaved their heads and burnt their cheeks with a small lighted roll of tapa. Tapa differs from ngatu merely by its not being stamped or imprinted with any pattern. So just like when the Tuitonga died, they shaved their heads and they burned their cheeks with some tapa. That's interesting because the markings of Fijians, and this may be nothing, because I only seen it in dance, how they mark themselves with black paint in areas where they're describing if a king died, this is where these markings would be. But I'm just reading between the lines and connecting the dots as I see fit and interest. But that would show the allegiance of the Fijians if that's the case. If they knew that the Tongans burned tapa and then burned their cheeks with the tapa, that's the color it would be. It would be black. It's because it's ash by then. After which the place was rubbed with the astringent berry of the masi. Let's read that one again. After which the place was rubbed with the astringent berry of the masi, which occasions it to bleed, and with the blood they smeared about the wound in a circular form to nearly about 2 inches in diameter, giving themselves a very unseemly appearance. Thanks for ruining my video, bro.
It's called a cameo.
Oh, okay. Cameo by Rich. So that's basically what he's saying. Astringent berry of the masi, which occasioned it to bleed. So the berry made the berry bleed, this masi thing. With the blood, they smeared about the wound in a circular form to nearly 2 inches in diameter, giving themselves a very unseemly appearance. The footnote says, those whose love for the deceased is very great, or who wish it to be thought so, instead of burning their cheeks in the way mentioned, rub off the cuticle by beating and rubbing their cheeks with plat wound round their hands made of the husk of the coconut. And this is a most painful operation. Yeah, that would be. That would be. But it's again the ones showing the most loyalty, allegiance, and faithfulness to the spirit of Finau Ulukalala or whoever dies. They're continually showing them, the dead, how much they love them by hurting themselves. But they would take tapa, burn their cheeks, then they would take the berry of the masi and then rub it with it. And the only thing I see that resembles anything like that are faces painted during dances, whether it's war dance or any kind of dance. I wonder if they still do that or if they did that because of this ordinance. They repeat this friction with the berry every day, making the wound bleed afresh. And the men, in the meantime, neglect to shave and to oil themselves during the day. They do, however, at night for the comfort which it affords. After having in the first place burnt their cheeks and shaved their heads, they built for themselves small temporary huts for their own accommodation during the time of mourning, which lasts 20 days. The women who have become tapud by touching the dead body remain constantly in the faitoka, except when they want food, for which they retire to one or other of these temporary houses to be fed, as mentioned in the note, but they sleep in the faitoka. We talked about the tapud hands, right? Anybody who touches a body of an eiki, their hands become tapu. They're not allowed to eat with those hands, depending on the height of the chief. It could be a day, it could be a week, it could be the whole 20 days that they're celebrating finaus. But because their hands are tapud, because they touch the body of a chief, somebody else has to feed them, right? We talked about that with the poniwa. The guys who touched the poniwa, they couldn't eat with their hands, so somebody else came and fed them, like, fed them. The provisions with which these tapud mourners are provided were, on this occasion, sent by the different chiefs and matapules with bales of ngatu, first to the young prince, and then ordered the great part of them to be placed on the ground at some distance from the grave, or else laid down before the temporary house, to which the chief of the tapud women retires to be fed. And she orders them to be distributed to the different chiefs and matapules, who again share them out in the usual way. So it seems like either the lead wife, the top wife, is the one presiding over this. But either way, a place is set apart for all the women who touched Finau Ulukalala to come sit and be fed by other people, by other women. The 5th and 10th day of such a ceremony are, however, marked by a greater quantity of provision than ordinary being sent, for which they give no reason but that of custom. This is the dangers of custom right here, huh? I guess anything is eventually you go through the motions without even know the purpose. But the tapu is a good enough purpose for any believer. On the 20th day, there is also an unusually large quantity sent by way of finishing the funeral ceremony. With these provisions, they also send every day a supply of tomes to light up the faitoka during the light. Tome. Tome is off of the coconut tree. It's before the coconut tree is... what part of it is it? It's like the leaf that doesn't sprout all the way, but it dries up and you can fold it in half and you can make a torch out of it. Because it lights it up. So a tome is a sort of torch. What tome? These tomes are held by a woman who, when fatigued with this office, is relieved by another. They are of the lower ranks, and as well as the others, when not oppressed by sleep, in general, spend their time in talking upon indifferent subjects. Interesting. Tomes. So what he's saying here is, these nights, there is a woman standing with a tome torch by the faitoka. It says here, these tomes are held by a woman who, when fatigued with this office, is relieved by another. And another woman trades places with her when she gets tired. They're lower rank, and when they're not tired, in general, spend their time in talking upon different subjects. So I'm imagining a woman sitting there with a tome torch, lighting the cemetery, the grave. I guess it's for visits, it's for whatever purposes to allow people to come and see the grave. But it says here that she is leading in conversation. spend their time in talking upon indifferent subjects. That's what they do. These Tome women who like the faitokas. During these 20 days also, if anyone passed the faitoka, he must proceed with a slower pace, his head bowed down and his hands clasped before him. If he have no burden, and if he have, he must lower it from his shoulder, for instance, and carry it in his hands or upon his bended arms. But if he can conveniently do it, he will go a circumstance route to avoid the grave. So, you walk before a grave of a king, especially of Finau Ulukalala. You have something on your shoulder. Take it down and carry it like this with your head down. If you don't have anything, clasp your hands. Remember, I told you about how clasp hands means you're not there for war. If you were to sit down before somebody with crossed legs and clasped hands and head down, you're showing that other person that you're not a threat. And this is how you're supposed to walk in front of the cemetery of Finau Ulukalala. Humbly, basically. Do it humbly. But at the same time, it says, if you can, just avoid this area altogether. Go around. And we do that all the way down into a conversation between two people. And one of my kids gets nearby, like he's going to cross in front of our conversation. I would stop him, or I would tell him, correct himself, and say tulo, which means, excuse me. You don't walk in between people, right? This is the cultural way of believing. We believe that it's disrespectful, and it's pleasing to the gods to behave this way. When you walk in front of people, don't. If you can, avoid walking between people talking. Walk around them, and we're taught that from a young age. Think when you see people talking, takai hake mui. Go around. Don't walk between them. Don't walk in front of people. Don't walk like. And we give that to everybody. We give everybody that same type of respect as far as look at where you're standing, look at how you're standing. If somebody is sitting and you walk up and you're standing next to somebody sitting, they're going to expect you to sit or go stand somewhere else because it's not respectful for you, especially back in those days, I'm sure. If somebody was sitting and you stood right next to me, like you're only a gust of wind away from me seeing your balls right next to my face. It seems like that's what, have that in your mind when you're standing near people and when you're walking near people, as far as respecting the entire thought processes and read the room, huh? These 20 days also, if anyone passed the faitoka, must proceed with a slow pace, with his head bowed down and his hands clasped before him. If he had no burden, and if he have, he must lower it from his shoulder, for instance, and carry it in his hands or upon his bended arms. But if he can conveniently do it, he will go a circuitous route. He will go a circuitous route to avoid the grave. Here it may be observed that in all occasion, when a man with a burden passes a great chief, or the grave of a great chief, particularly if there be anyone near to see him, he lowers his burden out of respect. Every day, also, one or more approach and sit before the grave for 2 or 3 hours, beating their faces with their fists. Natuki. Finau did that in Maufanga again with the matapuras around him. The ones who were close to him. They would sit there and and yell out, praises to the dead. Sometimes they bruise their heads with clubs, in which case they stand up. Finau's chief widow, Mongatupo, remember her? Mongatupo, every morning, attended by her women, cut the grass short before the grave with the knives and sharp shells, sweeping away leaves and loose blades with brooms made of the midrib of the coconut leaf. Anybody who knows what that is knows that the midrib of the coconut leaf. You tear the two sides off, and the midrib is that piece, and you get like 100 of them, put them together, and that's a broom. They also procured sweet-scented plants, principally the siare, and planted them before the grave. So sweet-scented plants, the siare, are planted before the grave, and they do that even till today. These are the uniform and essential circumstances which always take place during this part of the ceremony of burying chiefs. We now come to speak of those which were peculiar to this particular instance. Bruh. John Martins keeps on trying to drop bars and twist my tongue. We now come to speak of those which were peculiar to this particular instance. So I guess we're going to talk about people who have a lot to do with this. On the day after the deceased Hau, there you go, calls him a Hau again, a champion, was put in the ground, the principal chief and Mataapures requested the prince to intimate to Vuna and certain other chiefs their wish that they should go to the Hapai Islands. So it seems like the chiefs of Mataapures are telling the prince, Finau Ulukalala at this time, Vuna and the other chiefs, their wish that they should go to the Hapai Islands. So it seems like some of the chiefs of Mataapures want Vuna and them go to the Hapai Islands. This he did, but at the same time gave them liberty to stop till the funeral ceremony was concluded. Vuna received this intimation in a becoming manner, acknowledging the impropriety of his stay if the people were anyway jealous of his presence. Oh, so Vuna's requesting to leave, just in case. The prince apologized for this step, urging the will of his people as his sole motive, and expressed with great warmth his wish that he who had been so long his friend and companion could still remain his associate. So Mourning was basically telling Vuna, fucking what the? Oh shit. The flies are fighting, bro. They're fighting near me. The body. Okay. So anyway, Vuna's Mourning was telling him, all right, cool, look, you can go ahead and go to Hapai. We'll be close friends. We've always been homies. You know what I mean? We're always going to be friends. Let's be friends. Vuna received this intimation in a becoming manner, acknowledging the impropriety of his stay if the people were any way jealous of his presence. The prince apologized for this step, urging the will of his people as his sole motive, and expressed with great warmth his wish that he who had been so long his friend and companion could still remain his associate. So he's telling you, you know what, I'll go ahead. I'm only telling you this because this is what the Vava'u people want. They don't want you here, bro. But we'll still be cool. We'll still be friends. The following day, at a general assembly of the chiefs and Mataapures, after the kava was prepared and the 2 first cups handed out, the third, which according to custom was presented to the chief who presides, was next filled. And when an attendant, as usual, declared aloud that it was so, all eyes were fixed on the prince. The following day, at a general assembly of the chiefs Mataapures, after the kava was prepared and the first 2 cups were handed out, so everybody had 2 rounds, the third, which according to custom is presented to the chief 2 cups or 2 rounds? Oh, first 2 cups. Okay. This is the assembly of the chiefs and Matapures. The kava was prepared. The first 2 cups were handed out. The third, which according to custom is presented to the chief who presides, who was next filled. So this was the third cup. And when an attendant, as usual, declared it out loud that it was so, all eyes fixed on the prince. Talking about Finau, Moingangongo now, Finau Ulukalala's son. The Matapure who sat next to him then exclaimed, "Give it to Finau." Yes, yes. Now they're calling him Finau, straight up. And it was accordingly handed to him while he preserved an appearance of perfect unconcerned at the name by which, for the first time, he was called. So Moingangon was sitting there, and he gets the third cup. First 2 cups, obviously, were to the high chiefs, or the Tuitonga, and the next one was the Eiki below the Tuitonga. And now it's the chief that's going to take over as leader of Vava'u. And that was Finau Moingangongo. And one of the attendant Matapures, once the third cup was filled, he said, "Oangeya Finau." Mariner said that's the first time they called him Finau. He took over the title of Finau. Maufanga was Ulukalala's dad. Finau Ulukalala ran with it and ran well with it. And now it's Moingangongo's turn to run with the name Finau. But at the same time, he didn't act excited or anything like that, right? We talked about how you want to maintain your cool and just be cool, almost stoic when you're being praised and worshiped. By saying, yeah, that's me. Motherfucker, bro. This shit's pissing me off. All these fucking flies. Let me try to fix this shit. Gadax, cuz. Put this fly tape back behind that chair, see if it works. Okay. Bro, I feel like I'm in fucking India up in this bitch. Ain't this a mother... Oh, how the hell did these niggas get up in here? This is trippy. This is tripping me out. I'm tripping out right now. Ugh. Okay, anyway, let's see. What do we got? Okay. So, all the funeral stuff is over. We're gonna do this, cut this into 2. As soon as all the kava was served out and drunk, Finau addressed the company. Okay, we'll start at Finau Moingangongo's address on the next one. After the funeral, everything is good, rock and roll. The next one, we're gonna start Moingangongo's address. Okay? Till then, I'm gonna get these flyers about my life. Okay. We'll finish this mañana, everybody. Mañana. Tadoxio. Questions, comments, let me know. New Zealand, malo. Lanaki, lanai. Interesting. Yep. And we'll continue this tomorrow. Or maybe later on. Because the next chapter 13, part 2 will be mañana, tomorrow. Ovad kamodo. Okay.